The screech of metal on metal, sharp enough to grind the teeth, was the first sound of a new life and the last sound of the old one. The prison van, reeking of vomit, sweat, and cheap tobacco, jerked to a stop. Behind the thick steel door came the crack of a bolt sliding open, like a spine snapping. Light hit their eyes. Not sunlight, dead light. The electric glare of the watchtower. "Out, scum! One by one. Hands behind your backs. Faces down." The guard's voice rasped with hatred polished by repetition. Arseny, Senya to the few who still dared call him that, was the last to crawl out of the suffocating van. The icy air of 1962 stabbed his lungs. Beneath his boots, snow crunched, dirty, trampled by thousands of feet, mixed with coal dust. As far as the eye could see stretched the fence, layers of barbed wire coiled tight like a predator's muscles. Watchtowers loomed at every corner, black silhouettes of silent spiders guarding the perimeter. There were 5 of them, 5 men in identical gray quilted coats, their faces carved by wind and fear. Fear ruled this place, heavier than the stench of latrines or the sour stink of prison gruel. "Name, article, term," barked the sergeant, his frostbitten face purple. "Kirillov, 109, 8 years. Potapov, 206, Part 2, 5 years. When Senya's turn came, he raised his head, voice steady. "Belozyortsev, Arseny, 158, Part 3, robbery, 25 years. The sergeant froze, studying him. 25 years wasn't just time. It was a mark, either a madman or a serious man. "Serious, huh?" the guard hissed. "We'll beat that seriousness out of you. Line up, move." The strip search was pure humiliation. Naked in a freezing room, they stood while guards cursed and tore through their pitiful belongings. A young one shoved 2 fingers in Senya's mouth, checking for contraband, then made him squat several times. Senya obeyed in silence, eyes fixed on the wet concrete floor where he saw only one thing, his mother's eyes in court, drained of tears. That memory was the last fragile thread tying him to the world beyond the wire. After the search, bath, streams of freezing, then scalding water. A stinking bar of soap that scraped the skin raw, as if trying to wash off shame, not dirt. Then came the uniform, black, coarse, with white patches crudely stitched on chest and back, marked with a number, SK 734. The man was erased. Only the number remained. They were led through another gate into the living zone. Long, low wooden barracks in dull rows, smoke pouring from chimneys. Between them moved men in the same black uniforms, hauling stretchers, chopping wood, standing still, smoking into nothing. All turned their heads toward the newcomers. Hundreds of eyes, hungry, predatory, or empty, studied them. Senya felt like a piece of meat tossed into a den of starved wolves. "Barrack 7!" the escort shouted, pointing toward the far end. "Report to the overseer." The door groaned open. A wall of heavy, foul air hit his face. Sweat, tobacco, rot, despair. Inside was dim. Double-tier bunks lined the walls, leaving a narrow aisle. Maybe 100 men lived here. Some slept, some played cards, some mended clothes. Silence fell as the new ones entered. From a corner screened by a sheet, a broad figure rose, short but thick as a wardrobe, cropped hair, bull neck, crushed nose, faded tattoo rings on his fingers. He swaggered forward, 2 younger shadows behind him. "Fresh meat," he drawled, voice gravelly. "Where's the stage from?" One newcomer grinned weakly. "Perm Transit, boss." The bull's fist slammed into his gut. He folded, gasping. "No bosses here, scum," the man said lazily. "There are people, and there are animals. You've chosen your side." He turned to the crowd, eyes like drills. "I'm Tooth, watching this barrack. I keep order. Everyone knows their place. Say who you are." He pointed at the first man. "Man," the inmate croaked. "Man," the second echoed. Tooth nodded. That was a safe cast. The workers. They kept quiet, paid their dues, stayed out of the thieves' business. No trouble if they didn't screw up. Then Tooth stopped before Senya. The stink of garlic and sweat hit his face. "You, pretty boy, 25 years ain't for pretty eyes. You a thief?" The question was a blade, the test. Answer, yes, and you'd better live by the code, know the names, the rules, the hierarchy, or you'd be beaten to death for faking it. Say no, call yourself man, and you'd be marked weak, a sellout. Senya met Tooth's gaze, silent. The room froze. What, cat got your tongue? Tooth sneered. Or maybe you're one of the low ones, huh? Should I send you straight to the freak's corner? Laughter rippled from his lackeys. That was a death insult. To stay silent now meant agreeing, to be crushed on day one. I'm a convict, Senya said evenly. Same as everyone here, I came to do my time. Convict, Tooth repeated, tasting the word. Smart, neither thief nor man. So, what are you? A drifter, Senya answered. That title meant something too. Not yet a thief, but living by the code, earning his way. But it came with weight. I'm the kind who answers for his words, Senya added calmly. And I don't answer stupid questions. There'll be a meet. I'll talk with the men then. You ain't my judge or prosecutor. The air went hard. No one spoke. Tooth's man stepped forward, but Tooth raised a hand, circling Senya slowly, eyes calculating. Heard that, Knuckles? He said to one of his goons. He knows about meetings. Maybe he's no fake. He stopped again before Senya. All right, smartass. You answer for your words? Then riddle me this. 2 pieces of sugar lie on a bunk. One's for a thief, one's for a snitch. You walk in, which do you take? A classic trap. Take the thieves, claim the title, get tested to the bone. Take the snitches, mark yourself as filth. Refuse both. Insult the code, reject the thieves' share. Every answer was death. Senya closed his eyes for a moment. Memory struck. Gunpowder, a woman's scream, blood sticky on his hands. Not his blood, his partner's. The same partner who later betrayed him in court. He swore then no one would ever force him into a choice with no right answer. He opened his eyes. I won't take either, he said. Tooth smirked. Told you he's fake, refusing a thief's sugar. I drink tea without sugar, Senya cut him off. And if I want it sweet, I'll earn it or take it myself. But not from a bunk where a thief's sugar lies next to a snitch's. I'm picky. A murmur rolled through the room. It was a strong answer, sharp but within the rules. He hadn't rejected the thieves' code, yet stood above the dilemma. Tooth stared long and hard, torn between rage and respect. Then he grunted. Picky, huh? We'll see how picky you are, knee-deep in mud at the factory. Give him the top bunk by the aisle. Let him breathe fresh. That was punishment and test. The aisle spot was chaos. Always stepped on, no rest. But visible to all, every move watched. Senya climbed to the upper bunk without a word. The wood was cold and hard. He lay back, hands behind his head, staring at the soot-black ceiling. He'd passed the first test, the easy one. Hell was ahead. The barrack breathed and groaned around him. Coughs, whispers, cards shuffling, spoons scraping bowls. It was alive, and he was a foreign body the system would either absorb or destroy. Half an hour later, the door creaked again. Another man entered, thin, about 60, straight-backed despite his age. The same black uniform hung on him like a suit. His wrinkled face framed by gray brows held eyes sharp as razors. He ignored everyone, walked to the far corner, and sat on the lower bunk in the thieves' section. Tooth rose instantly. Evening, Mikhail Ivanovich, he said, voice suddenly respectful. The old man nodded slightly. New guy, Tooth added, nodding toward Senya. Mouthy one, calls himself Picky. The old man looked up. His gaze met Senya's and froze him to the marrow. It wasn't anger or threat. It was bottomless fatigue, the kind born from knowing too much. He saw through Senya, his fear, defiance, past, maybe even his future. Everyone's picky till they're hungry, he said softly, voice creaking like an old door. Hunger cures that. He turned away. Tooth lingered, then silently went back to his place. Senya lay still. He knew who the old man was, the Count, a legend, a crown thief from before the war. They said he'd done 40 years already. That one word from him was law in any camp. His whisper echoed in Senya's head. Hunger cures that. He hadn't meant food, he meant hunger for life, for power, for survival, the hunger that makes men step over everything sacred. Senya closed his eyes. The van, the search, the humiliation, the sugar riddle, all faded beside that voice. He understood now. He wasn't in a prison. He was in a world with its own laws, harsher than the state's, where a human life wasn't worth a cube of sugar, where every day was a choice, and every choice had a price. The cold crept not from outside, but within, born in the stomach's emptiness, crawling up like an icy snake to settle in his chest. He was hungry already, and he knew. To survive 25 years here, he'd have to stay hungry. Hungry enough to forget disgust, hungry enough to become part of the beast. A cough came up from below, a muffled whisper, the creak of boards under someone turning in their bunk. The barrack lived its muted nightlife, the life of hundreds of bodies heaped together, each body radiating its own fear, its own hatred, its own longing. He had been here only a week, 7 days stretched into eternity. The transfer, the van, the preliminary cell, the press hata, the remand center, all of that had been merely prelude. The real zone began here in this damp barrack number 7, where the air ran thick with sweat, cheap homegrown tobacco, and unwashed foot wraps. Here every look was assessment and every word a test. Kirpich, who had already done a couple of stints for juvenile theft and hooliganism, knew the first mistake would be the last. He was not a green rookie, but neither was he one of the self-evident, everyone-knows-it virtuosos. He was in a gray zone, suspended, where you had to prove your right not to be eaten. The silence was broken by the door's creak. A thick-set figure of a runner, nicknamed Sipley, appeared in the doorway, a small hanger-on who served the local authorities. His drill-like eyes swept the dim barrack and stopped at Kirpich's berth. To Sukari, Sipley's voice was exactly as his nickname implied. To Sukari, quick. Kirpich felt his heart skip, then hammer dull as a funeral drum. To Sukari. Sukari was the overseer of the barrack, the right hand of Sidoy, a thief-in-law who held the whole zone. A summons to Sukari at midnight promised nothing good. This was not a friendly chat over a pot of shefir. This was a summoning to the carpet. Kirpich slid silently off his bunk. Boots without laces touched the icy plank floor. He did not hurry. In this world, haste signaled fear. He pulled his coat tight, adjusted his ushanka. Every move was under the aim of dozens of eyes watching from the dark. They waited to see how he would walk, whether he would falter, whether he would show weakness. Sipley shifted impatiently from foot to foot while he waited. When Kirpich drew level, the runner jerked his chin toward the smoke room, the little box room at the end of the barrack where Sukari lived, and where all serious questions were decided. "Come on, don't dawdle," he rasped. Kirpich answered nothing. He walked steady, keeping his gait firm. His hands in his coat pockets were clenched to fists until his nails bit his palms. He did not know what awaited him. Accusations of snitching, suspicion of ties to the Kum, or simply someone needing a torpedo to eliminate an inconvenient man. Any option could end with a shiv in the ribs in a dark corner, or a demonstrative beating before the whole barrack. The smoke room door was covered with an old blanket for warmth. Sipley knocked the code, 2 shorts, 1 long, then pushed in without waiting. Inside it was hot and smoky. A small stove burned red in the corner. A kerosene lamp on a rough table threw jagged, ugly shadows on the walls. 2 men sat at the table. Sukari, a massive man of about 40 with a square jaw and a bull neck into which the word "believe" seemed tattooed in blue ink, stared at Kirpich with small, cruel eyes like clamps. Beside him, on a low stool, a little back, sat Sidoy. Sidoy was the opposite of Sukari, thin, almost withered, about 60. Hair completely white, his face carved by a dense web of wrinkles as if he had been whittled out of old wood. On the slender aristocratic fingers, the thief's rings glinted. Tattoos told his story more plainly than any words. He did not look at Kirpich. He turned an empty cartridge case in his hands, and his calm was harsher than open aggression. Sidoy's presence raised the stakes to a peak. This was not merely a barrack-level squabble. It was an examination from the top. "Come in, sit." Sidoy's voice was quiet and slightly hoarse, but in the dead stillness of the smoke room, it sounded like a verdict. He nodded toward an empty crate by the wall. Kirpich sat without a word. He kept his spine straight and met Sukari's heavy gaze. "Heard you were a decent man on the outside," Sukari began without greeting, his voice like metal scraping glass. "Didn't work for the Reds, lived straight by life. Words, you know how wind is? Today they are here, tomorrow gone." Kirpich kept silent. He understood any word could be used against him. We don't trust words here, Sukari continued, leaning forward, his breath stale with sweat and booze. We trust deeds. You understand me? I understand, Kirpich answered shortly. His voice did not waver. Sadoy lifted his eyes. His look had an unusual clarity, piercing, as if he saw not a face but a soul. A man, Kirpich, is known by choice, Sadoy said quietly. When there are two paths and both are shit. You have to find a third if you have the sense. He paused, and in that pause the world's tension hung. Sukari smiled crookedly and rapped his knuckles on the door. The blanket was pushed aside, and Siple shoved in a figure, or what remained of one. A beaten, trembling little man in a torn uniform with dead terror in his eyes. No tattoos on his chest except a number scrawled in pencil. He was a cock, an opushchenyi, the lowest caste in the camp hierarchy, contact with which was a stain not washable. His name was something like Cherok. He had sunk into that caste for some petty failing early in his term. Maybe he lifted a bar of soap in the bath, or simply could not stand up for himself. Now he was nobody, a living corpse. Cherok shivered without looking up. In his hands he clutched a deck of cards, new and almost untouched, a deck valued like gold in the zone. Sukari gestured to the trembling hands of the cock. Here, Kirpich, a gift from the Brotherhood, he said with a grin. As a sign of respect. Kirpich felt a cold sweat run down his spine. The trap closed, simple and deadly like a wolf trap. The choice was obvious and impossible. If he took the cards from the cock's hands, he would be shamed at once. He would cease to be a man in the prisoner's eyes. His place would be where the cock belonged at the latrine. They would beat him, rape him, and throw him from the human world forever. That was the end. Instant death of reputation and probably physical death to follow. If he refused the gift, he would show disrespect to Sadoy and Sukari. A gift from the Brotherhood is more than a present. It is a gesture. To refuse is to spit in the face of the overseer and the thief in law. For such insolence, they could break him then and there, beat him to a cripple, or just stab him as a rebel. Time slowed. He heard the buzz of blood in his ears, the ticking of invisible clocks counting his last seconds of life, or honor. He stared at the cards in Cherok's hands. Smooth and clean, they seemed the most filthy thing in the world. He looked to Sukari. Sukari regarded him with open predatory mockery, then at Sadoy. The old thief remained calm. He watched like a scientist watching a reaction in a flask. The third path. Sadoy had spoken of a third way. Where was it? Thoughts flapped in his head like crazed birds. Claim you do not play. A lie, everyone knows you play. Say the cards are not needed. A blunt refusal. Strike the cock. A senseless cruelty that resolves nothing. The cards would remain. Then he understood. The trap was not in the cards. The trap was in the situation itself. They were testing not his knowledge of the code, but his spirit, his will, his ability to think under pressure. Kirpich rose slowly from the crate. He did not look at Sukari or Sadoy. His gaze was fixed on the trembling cock. He stepped toward him. Cherok hunched, expecting a blow, but Kirpich did not touch him. He stopped a step away and spoke calmly and clearly, addressing no one and everyone at once. The thieves' law says a decent man does not sit at the same table with an opushchenyi, breath the same air. It's a disgrace. Sukari tensed. His hand dropped to the table, ready to grab something heavy. Kirpich continued without raising his voice, but putting weight into every word. But to give me from his hands an object that later honest men will use to settle fate, to play a game, if you offer me that, either you do not know the code yourself, or you take me for a fool who can be made to accept any filth. I am not a fool, father, and I do not doubt your knowledge of the law. He lifted his eyes and looked straight into Sadoy's faded, all-seeing pupils. So, there is only one way. He stepped forward, but not to the cock. He reached and took the kerosene lamp from the table. The hot glass burned his fingers, but he did not flinch. So, it is not the cards, he said, looking at the deck in the cock's hands. It is just trash, and trash must be burned. Before anyone could react, he splashed kerosene from the lamp over the deck. Cock! The little man screeched and shoved the burning, torch-like cards away. They fell and flared, the smoke room filled with the acrid smell of charred paper and ink. Cherok screamed from terror and pain. Kerosene had splashed on his hands. He cowered in a corner. Sipley stood at the door, stunned. Sukari leapt up, face purple with fury. "What are you doing, bastard?" he roared, swinging his huge fist. "Stand!" One quiet word from Sidoy stopped Sukari, as if a blow to the gut. He froze with his arm raised, breathing hard, eyes moving from Kirpich to the old thief. Sidoy rose slowly. He walked to the burning cards, looked at the flames, then at Kirpich. In his eyes there was neither anger nor surprise. There was something else, an assessment and perhaps respect. "Right," he said. "That was trash." He turned to Sukari. "Remove him." He nodded at the whimpering cock. "And that one too." He waved towards Sipley. Sukari, still seething but unable to disobey, grabbed the cock by the scruff and hauled him out of the smoke room. Sipley slunk after. Kirpich stood in the middle of the room. The lamp in his hand went out. His fingers stung from the burn. Adrenaline ebbed, leaving a hollow and a tremor throughout his body. He had survived. He had found the third path. He had not merely refused, he had destroyed the very object of shame, turning the situation from humiliation to principle. He had not insulted a thief. On the contrary, he had appealed to the same law. Sidoy went to the table, pulled a cigarette from a pack, rolled it between thin fingers, and lit it from the dying cards on the floor. He smoked slowly, blowing gray rings at the ceiling. "Clever," he said finally, without looking at Kirpich. "Or desperate. Sometimes that is the same thing." "Surname?" he asked. "Savaliev." "Kirill," Kirpich answered. "Savaliev," Sidoy repeated as if tasting the name. "Why are you sweating?" 206 Part 3. It is the right one. Hooligan with aggravating circumstances. 7 years more. 8 of strict. Here you will not have freedom. Every day as if the last. You lived your day right today, but tomorrow a new test will come, and it will be harsher. He looked at Kirpich's burned hand. "Heal that hand. Remember, strength is not in swinging your fists. Sukari is strong but stupid. Strength is here." He tapped his temple and then his chest. "When there is no spirit and head won't help." He inhaled and went on. "In the barrack, you will say you lost a pack of cigarettes at cards. Understood?" "Understood," Kirpich nodded. "That was a cover story. Nobody should know about the test. It was a right reserved only for those in the room. Go and remember what I said. The smart survive here. The brazen become legends or dead." Kirpich stepped out of the smoke room. His legs were like cotton. The cold night air of the zone slapped his face and sobered him. Most men in the barrack already slept, but he knew they were awake, waiting. He reached his bunk, climbed up, and stared into the dark. He had passed the test. He had made his first step in this world. There was no joy, only a dull sucking emptiness. He looked at his hand. Blisters swelled on his fingertips. Pain was physical and real, but nothing compared to the cold that had settled inside him again. He had survived, but paid with a piece of himself. He proved he was ready to play by their rules, cruel, inhuman, and hypocritical. Sidoy, who spoke of spirit and intellect, had arranged this vile trap himself, using a living man as bait. Kirpich closed his eyes. Sidoy's calm, wise face stood before him like a patriarch, and the quiet words, "A man is known by his choice." Today he had made his choice, and that choice cut off forever his way back to a world where cards are just cards and men are not used as trash to test others. He had stepped deeper into this world and now must go to the end. Whatever that end might be, the damp evening air laid cold needles in his lungs. The zone fell quiet, preparing for night. Work crews returned from the industrial site, gray emaciated figures dragging feet through thawing mud. Mud, mixed with snow and coal dust, squelched under worn boots. In the distance, the spotlights on the towers fired to life and began to slice the perimeter with lifeless beams, picking out coils of frozen barbed wire in the drifts. Dogs in the kennels answered with low, cavernous howls as if the earth groaned under the weight of the camp night. Inside the barrack, the heavy, thick spirit hung. Sweat, wet uniforms, cheap tobacco, and something sour and stale, the smell of bondage itself. Men fell onto bunks without strength. Someone tried to dry foot wraps on a barely warm heating pipe. Someone else stared blankly at the plank ceiling, lost track of days and nights. In the corner, reserved for the thieves, life breathed differently. Here there was no that dead fatigue, only another kind, predatory, focused. Arkan sat on the edge of the lower bunk, back against the rough wall. Beside him, on a stool nailed from stolen boards, Phylan tinkered. In his long, almost musical fingers, a tin mug and a makeshift double-blade water heater looked like a surgeon's instruments. He brewed chefir, a thick resinous brew, the only thing that could warm the blood and clear the head, after 12 hours of slave work at the lumber yard. Zub, sprawled on his bunk opposite, was sharpening a file fragment on the edge of a metal bed. Wick, wick, wick. The sound dug into the brain, monotonous and threatening. He wasn't making a blade, he was just occupying his hands. That sound was part of his nature, like a snarl to a wolf. Sadoy sat a little aside in the shadows. He did not take part in the preparations, but his presence was physically felt. He was the center of this small universe. The old thief smoked, pinching a Belo Morcanal cigarette between two calloused fingers. Smoke lazily rose to the ceiling, mingling with the barracks vapors. His face in the half-light looked carved from stone. Deep wrinkles, like scars, cut across his forehead and cheeks, and his eyes under heavy brows looked somewhere inside, through the walls, through the barbed wire, through the years. Arkan kept silent. After that showdown with Bike, when Sadoy with one word put both turnkeys and blats who tried to break him in their place, they stopped picking on him. They accepted him, neither wholly as one of their own, but as a candidate, someone under observation. Every step, every word, every glance of his was weighed on invisible scales of the thieves' world. He felt it on his skin. The price of a mistake was too high, and he learned to be silent and listen. "Ready," Phylan said quietly, pulling out the heater. Thick steam smelling of bitterness and herbs rose from the mug. He poured a little brew into his cup, topped it with hot water, then handed the main mug to Sadoy. Sadoy took 2 large scalding gulps without flinching. Then the mug went around. Zub drank as if it were water and returned it to Phylan. Arkan drank last. The hot, astringent liquid burned his throat and spread warmth through his body. The head cleared. Fatigue receded, giving way to a ringing emptiness. "Good chefir," Zub croaked, setting the file aside. "Warms the soul, almost like free blood." Phylan smirked at the corner of his mouth and said nothing. His silence was always more eloquent than words. The hush, broken only by men's snores and the rasp of Zub's sharpening, was unexpectedly interrupted by Arkan. He didn't even know how it slipped out. Maybe the shafir loosened his tongue, maybe accumulated tension demanded release. "And Sadoy?" he began, voice uncertain, boyish. All eyes fell on him immediately. "How does this path begin at all? No one dreams from the cradle to spend life in camps." Zub stopped filing. In the new silence, his gaze became leaden. The question was bold, too personal, too blunt from a newcomer. Arkan felt cold. He knew he'd said too much. Zub could have risen and taught him a lesson for the long tongue. But Sadoy slowly turned his head. His eyes seemed to see Arkan through. He looked a long time without blinking, then unexpectedly answered calmly, "Every man's road is his own, boy. Roads differ, but they lead to the same place." He jerked his chin toward the barred window, where a beam from a searchlight skittered. "Some need forced it, some youthful foolishness, some character. Ask Zub. His road was straight as a rail." Zub snorted and took up the file again, but a spark of excitement flashed in his eyes. He liked to speak of himself. "What is there to tell?" he rasped, tracing a finger along the blade of the future point. "I'm from the outskirts, a worker there. Our law was simple. Who is stronger is right. Father came back from the war without a leg, drank away. Mother bent her back at 3 jobs. At 14, I was already carrying a blade, not for show. Neighborhood clashes, yard on yard. For a girl, for a pack of smokes. Back then you solved things with fists. Now it's by code talk, but then it was simpler. A punch, and that's that." He paused in memory. "First time I landed in juvenile, got 3 years maybe. There were dances in the factory club. I was with some girl and some city punk tried to pull her. Word for a word, and I shoved a blade under his ribs. Not deep, so he wouldn't brag, and he squealed. Cops took me from home 2 hours later. In juvenile, they taught quickly. Either you drive the devils out, or they drive you. I chose the first. I left a different man. I realized that working the factory for 120 rubles a month isn't for me. I organized a crew, we shook down market merchants, lived well, women, taverns, money flowing. Zub spoke without a trace of remorse. more with animal pride. Then I really got pinned. There was a merchant, a jeweler, paid well, then thought himself clever. He squealed to the cops. 2 of ours were killed on the spot. I escaped. I found him a week later in an entryway. He crawled on his knees, crying, naming wife and children. He said the cum pressured him, forced him, but I didn't care. He betrayed us. Die. I didn't stab him in the side. I slit his throat from ear to ear so others would know what pays for bitch nature. He smiled bitterly. They caught me a month later. 15 years strict. That's the straight road. No turns. Here I'm the same as outside, only fenced in. My law is strength. While I have strength, I live. If I don't, they'll eat me. And that's right. His story was simple and terrible, like a knuckled blow. Arkan felt a chill down his spine. He had seen men like Zub outside. For them, there were no notions, no laws, except the law of the stronger. In prison, they became ideal soldiers for thieves' authorities. Cruel, obedient, merciless. Not everyone is like that. Arkan couldn't hold back and said quieter, almost a whisper. Phelan, who had been silent, set the mug down. Not everyone, he said in his quiet, clipped voice, as if afraid to scare words away. Zub's path is a bulldozer's, forehead through the wall. And there are other roads where the head is needed, not fists. And what was your way, Phelan? Sedoy asked with a note of interest. He knew his men's stories, but liked to hear them again to find new details, new shades. Phelan shrugged. Mine was quiet. I wasn't in for knives. I'm a locksmith thief. Pride of the craftsman warmed his tone. Since childhood, he loved to pick locks. First mailboxes, then the father's shed, then neighbors' apartments. The hands felt how the pins moved in the cylinder. An old thief, may he rest, noticed me. Grisha the locksmith taught me not just to break, but to open neatly, quietly, without noise or dust. Good locksmiths are like good lovers, gentle, so the lock opens itself, not from fear, he smiled to himself. We worked clean, took only from those who'd stolen from people, shop managers, party bigwigs. For us, it was like restoring justice. The money went to the common fund, warmed zones, helped families. I liked the process, the adrenaline when you stand in a stranger's flat in total silence and hear only your heart and the pick clicking, stronger than any vodka or woman. And what got you caught? Zub asked, to whom this lyric was foreign. A woman ratted us out, Phelan shook his head. No, worse, a traitor among our own. He told of a young runner who pocketed a jewel and later ran to the coombe, betraying all. Phelan's tale had no Zub-like bloodthirst. It carried icy betrayal. Arkan understood why Phelan was so silent and watchful. He had once been betrayed and wouldn't allow it again. Silence fell. Everyone thought his own thoughts, of force which breaks and of betrayal which kills. All eyes turned to Sedoy. He was last, the chief. His story should answer all questions. Sedoy stubbed his cigarette, carefully extinguished the butt on the metal bed edge, and tucked it away. No traces must remain. My road, he began slowly, and the barracks seemed to freeze. Even the men's snores grew quieter. My road began not with a blade or pick, but with hunger. After the war, I was a kid when it ended. Father didn't return. Mother worked in a factory for ration cards. Around us I saw another world, the factory director living grandly, the party chairman eating black caviar with a spoon. They told us about the bright future in communism. While they lived like kings, they stole whole shipments and jailed the woman who stole an ear of corn to feed her children. Then I realized their law is a lie. Their justice exists for them alone. He looked at his hands, big, knotted, blue with tattooed fingers. I saw people who didn't work for them, people who lived by their own rules, thieves. They didn't bow to an owner, didn't believe in those lies. They had their own world, their law, and it seemed more honest. In our law, you can't work for the authorities. You can't have a family because family is weakness to be used against you. You cannot take up arms for the state unless the thief's business requires it. The money we took went to the common fund, we were a state within an idea. We were against them, against the Reds, against their false system. I was crowned in 52 up north at age 22. Old thieves, hardened before the revolution, remembered what thieves' honor was. They held a gathering in the barrack, 15 thieves in law, asked if I was ready to give my life for the idea. I answered, and they said, "You shall be a thief." They tattooed stars on my clavicle. It was like baptism. I renounced the old world and became part of the brotherhood. I believed sacredly. He fell silent, and a longing crossed his eyes that made Arcan uneasy, not longing for freedom, but for a lost faith. I carried the law through dozens of camps, Vladimir Centaural, White Swan. I enforced the code, broke the sucks who made deals with administration, held zones, organized funds. For me, the gathering was the highest court. The thieves' word was truth. We decided fates, spheres of influence. Our rulings were law for the criminal world. I believed we were the salt of the earth who still had honor. Sedoy's crooked smile held bitterness. Then things changed. After Stalin's death, the grip loosened. Big money appeared and began to seep into our world. The funds that ended up in the common fund were not just thieves' money, but merchants. At gatherings, they began speaking less about notions and more about shares and percentages. New thieves were crowned not for the idea, but for money. Oranges, we called them, bought their crowns. The old were gone, some dead, some broken, replaced by young greedy men for whom the thieves' idea was a screen for robbery. I remember a gathering in '61 about a big industrialist who had betrayed some of ours. By the notions, he should have been punished harshly, but he offered vast sums to the common fund and half voted to take the money and forgive him, selling honor for paper. That's when I realized rot was in our kingdom. The idea was dying, only business remained. Sedoy sighed heavily. That is my road, Arcan. From sacred belief in the law to the understanding that the world is built on lies. Maybe another world, but still lies. I couldn't accept it. At one gathering, I stood against everyone and told them they were merchants, that they had sold what our grandfathers died for. They called me a troublemaker. They tried to strip him of his crown, but he lacked the spirit. The old guard still remembered me, but I was handed over, turned into the cops over a petty case which they blew up to all union scale to remove me from the road, so I wouldn't hinder them building their new commercial world. So here I am, doing my sentence out, watching what I believed in all my life crumble to dust. The barrack fell into a dead silence. Even Zub stopped filing his knife. Sedoy's story covered them like a grave slab. It was not merely a life story. It was a verdict on an entire world, a sentence the old thief pronounced on himself and his faith. There was no excuse in his words, only endless black fatigue and the bitterness of realizing that a life of deprivation, pain, and cruelty, laid on the altar of the thief's idea, might have been a mistake. Arcan lay on his bunk staring at the darkness above. Zub's, Phelan's, and Sedoy's voices spun in his head into a single dreadful chorus. The path of force, the path of cunning, the path of idea. 3 roads, 3 fates, all meeting here in this stinking barrack under indifferent searchlight beams. He thought of Sedoy's words about gatherings, how everything changes. All gatherings had become lies. That sentence had not yet been spoken, but its shadow hovered over them. He understood that tonight they had not merely told stories. They had shown him a minefield map he had only just begun to walk, and he grasped the worst thing. Whatever path he chose would end with either a knife in the back from his own, a bullet from a stranger, or slow rot in these camps. And the worst was to live to Sedoy's age and realize you fought your whole life for a lie. Outside, the dogs barked again, loud and vicious, tearing the night. Arcan closed his eyes. A long, very long night lay ahead, and perhaps a similarly long life. Whether lucky or not, he did not yet know. The furnace room, the zone's heart, its filthy, heaving, hot gut. The roar there was such that you could scream into someone's ear and be unheard. 2 huge furnaces, like gaping maws of ancient beasts, bellowed, devouring coal dust shoveled by 2 exhausted men with blackened shovels. The air was thick as jelly, soaked with burned coal, machine oil, and old sweat. Brains melted from the heat, while soot-streaked walls exuded little black tear-like rivulets of condensate. It was here, where any cry drowned in the roar of flame, that the thieves' court was held. In the far corner by the dead third stove, where the single dim lamp hardly reached, a narrow ring had gathered. 10 men, no more, all blats. Not a single outsider among them, except the 2 coal workers pretending not to notice and praying to every god not to be touched. Arkasha, known here as Sadoy after that first gray strand at his temple from the incident with the snitch on the transfer, stood a little behind Reply. He wasn't part of the fight, he was a spectator. Reply himself had told him to come. Watch Sadoy and learn. They don't read books here, they turn life's pages with blood. In the center of the dimly lit ring, by the flickering glow of an open furnace door, stood Tash Kent. Tall, broad-shouldered, heavy-jawed with arrogant eyes. He wasn't a crown thief, but aimed high. Brought in from Central Asia 6 months earlier, he already built a gang of thugs, mostly compatriots, and pressed several barracks under his wing. He was a new force, bold, hungry, contemptuous of old authorities. Opposite him, hunched on an overturned pail, sat Fitil, an old thief who'd done time since Stalin. His nickname came from a hot temper in youth. Time and camps ground him down into a dry, coughing old man with faded tattoos on bony arms. Now he looked pitiful, left eye swollen purple, lower lip split. Reply, the zone's chief watcher, sat on makeshift bunks welded from rebar. He didn't look at Tash Kent or Fitil. He was picking at a match in his teeth, and in the half-light, his face was an unreadable mask. Beside him, like a loyal dog, stood Spider, short, wiry, long-limbed, with utterly empty, blinkingless eyes. Spider never spoke needless words. He acted. Rumor said his shank never missed. Gukla, cutting over the furnace roar, began to rasp, and all talk died instantly. Even the coal workers stilled for a breath. I heard someone's talking. Things aren't right in our camp. Fitil was beaten unjustly. Not just beaten, tormented. Tash Kent, word's yours. What will you tell the people? Tash Kent sneered. He showed neither fear nor respect. What do you call a lawman? He spat. Playing cards? Fitil gambled away his stash, started cheating, clung to the notion. Word for word, he had a flare-up. Who hasn't? The lie was brazen and obvious. Fitil was known as an honest player. He could not have lost his month's tea ration. Flared up? Reply repeated softly, and a cold ran down Sadoy's spine. Is that your bull? The one who weighs 120 and fells with one blow? And Fitil cheated. The old thief, who'd lived half his life in camps, became a rat for a packet of tea. I trust my boys, Tash Kent cut in. His glance swept for support. Behind him stood 3 loyal fighters, including the bull, Muscle Mountain with a blunt bovine face. Fitil! Reply turned to the old man. Speak. Fitil coughed, spat bloody saliva on the concrete. His voice trembled, not from fear but humiliation. There was no game. I was going from the mess with saved bread. These 3 met me, the bull and his 2 Sixers. Give old man for Christ's bread. I said, not mine. He laughed. Now it's ours, and hit me twice. I fell. They took my bread and pulled the schifferback from my pocket. He faltered, ashamed to continue. The bull kicked my chest and said, tell us, old dog, or we'll put you down under the bunk. You'll smell the hole till your sentence ends. The furnace room held a dead silence. Even the furnace roar seemed muted. To take a last thing from an old convict and threaten to "opustit him." This wasn't mere robbery. It was pure lawlessness, a spit in the face of the whole thieves' code. Sadoy looked at Tash Kent. Tash Kent didn't flush. His face wore the same insolent grin. He was sure of his power. He'd come not to justify himself, but to show who now owned the camp. He's lying, Tash Kent said lazily. He's hot-headed. Where did that bruise come from? Maybe he fell. Ask my men. They'll confirm. Your men will say what you order them to, Reply replied calmly. He took the match from his mouth and tossed it into the dark. There's another thing. They say your eagles run a private kitty and take dues off men bypassing the ledger. Is that true? That was the second blow. The personal quarrel with Fitil was a pretext. The real cause was power and money. Tash Kent had organized skimming. The takings didn't go into the common thieves' fund that Reply controlled. This was rebellion. For a moment Tash Kent's face tightened. We live by notions, he hissed. We help who needs. Your common fund is old and stingy. We spin what we can. Times change, lawman. Not the 40s. Now, every man for himself. Only a rat hides in a corner, cut Reply, voice hard as steel. Thieves' brotherhood stands because we are one. You want to tear it to pieces for your machine? Maybe your machine's getting thin, Tashkent shot back brazenly. It was a deadly direct challenge. Sidoy felt Spider tense beside reply. His hand slid under his jerkin. The bull behind Tashkent cracked his neck. The air thickened. One more word, and the furnace room would be a slaughter. Reply rose slowly. Short compared to Tashkent, he nonetheless carried an old camp power that made even the bull step back. I asked you 2 questions, Tashkent, Reply rumbled. About Fiddle and about the kitty. You answered with lies and insolence. You came not to discuss, but to display horns. You think that with 3 bulls behind you, you can shit on the thieves' law. Tashkent was silent, his eyes narrowed. I give you one last chance, Reply continued, voice carrying to every corner despite the din. Admit your men acted unlawfully, return Fidel's goods in double, put your cut into the common fund as required, and punish your bulls severely so others won't try it. It was a humiliating offer to save face. Tashkent could comply, lose clout, but keep life in his gang. But Tashkent was different. A lone wolf who scorned hidden rules, he bet on brute force. I won't punish anyone, he spat. I won't bow to you, old stump. Your time's over. Reply nodded very slowly as if accepting the inevitable. I understand you, he said so quietly it barely carried, then looked not at Tashkent, but at Spider. The order was whole. What followed happened faster than Sidoy could blink. Spider didn't lunge. He made an imperceptible sideways move like a shadow. The bull, expecting a frontal attack, hesitated a fraction, and in that instant, Spider was at his side. A quick, almost invisible flick of the hand. The bull gasped. His huge body convulsed. He clutched his neck, and dark blood began spurting between his fingers. He stumbled, hit the wall, and slowly slid to the floor, leaving a wide, bloody trail. His eyes, a second ago full of dull rage, now showed only surprise. Tashkent's 2 other fighters froze, paralyzed by horror. They had seen the glint of a homemade shank flash from under Spider's jerkin and vanish. A long, sharpened nail wrapped with rag for a handle. Tashkent lunged for his dying man, but 2 Reply loyalists grabbed him and pinned him face first to the soot-blackened wall. He roared, struggled, but they held him in a dead grip. You're a cop slut, he screamed, voice tearing. Reply approached calmly. Rats kill from the back, he said. Avor punishes. You crossed the line, Tashkent. You put muscle above family, law. You thought power is in the muscle. Real power is in the law. He turned to the others. He nodded at the convulsing bull. He answered for lawlessness. He will not hurt anyone again. Then he faced Tashkent. He will live, but he is no longer Tashkent. He's nobody. Reply looked at Tashkent's 2 remaining fighters. They stood pale as death. You saw everything. You followed a man who destroys law. Are you ready to trample your own? I give you a chance. He stepped to a bucket of dirty water, used by stokers to wet rags, scooped a handful and flung it in Tashkent's face. You are not a thief, not a bro, not even a man. You're filth. Go to the hole. He swept his gaze over the trembling men. Who among you wants that fate? Heads bent in silence. Then the worst thing Sidoy saw. Reply gave the sign, and Tashkent was turned. Spider stepped to him, and with a short strike of the shank's handle hit the tendon behind the knee, forcing him to his knees. Choose, Reply told the 2 former followers. Either break with this lawless thug now, or lie next to him. One of them, a young man with frightened eyes, stepped forward, looked at Reply, then at kneeling Tashkent and, with a swing, kicked his yesterday leader in the face. Then another kicked. They beat him silently, fiercely, with the fear of men who just betrayed vows. Sidoy stood stunned, nauseated, not by the blood or cruelty, but by the ritual, the ugly, beastly spectacle of moral breaking. He watched men break a human, not only physically, but morally. They were turning him into nothing, and they did it with the hands of his own people. Reply stopped them with a gesture. Enough, take him away, he said, nodding toward the battered, gasping Tashkent. Leave him by the infirmary. Let everyone in the zone see what happens to those who confuse a thief's life with banditry. He went up to Fitil, who still sat on the pail, unable to rise, and laid a hand on his shoulder. You're old. Don't be afraid. No one will touch you again. Then he turned to Sidoy. There was no triumph or malice in his eyes, only a deadly weariness. You saw it, Sadoy? He asked. I saw, Arkasha rasped. This is the law, cruel but fair, like a surgeon. Sometimes you must cut away the rotten part so the body doesn't die. Tashkent was rot. He brought foreign notions from the outside, the notion of merchants and lawless thugs. If we hadn't stopped him, in a year the whole zone would have become a rat heap, where everyone eats everyone. Understand? Sadoy nodded. He understood with his head, but something in his soul broke. He saw the injustice. He saw one pack of Sidovs tear into another weaker one. He saw law reduced to the right of the strong, wrapped in pretty words about brotherhood and notions. Tashkent lost, not because he was wrong, but because Reply had men like Spider at his back, and behind Spider years of authority, and the whole thieves' system of the zone. They left the furnace room into the cold night air. The roar of the furnaces stayed behind. Here, under a starry sky ringed with searchlight towers, it was quiet. Reply lit a cigarette. We must remove the corpse, he said to Spider, who had materialized silently at the edge, and make sure the stokers stay quiet forever. Spider nodded without a sound and melted into the dark. Reply drew on his cigarette and looked at Sadoy. Hard for you, I see. Not used to it. Thought they played cards and drank Shefir here? No, kid. This is a daily war for life, for a place in the sun, for the right to be called a man and not beast. If you're not ready to tear throats for this law, it will devour you. Remember that. He flicked the butt, which traced a fiery arc in the dark, and walked off toward his barrack. Arkasha Sadoy remained alone, staring at the indifferent beams of the searchlights. He had just seen the system at work, its cruelty and logic. For the first time, a terrible heretical doubt arose in him. What if Tashkent was right? Not in his deeds, but that the old law is dying, that all those words about brotherhood, honor, and justice are only a veil hiding the same eternal struggle for power, where the winner is not the more righteous, but the one whose blade is sharper and whose hand steadier. He remembered Reply's face, calm, tired, the hangman performing justice. He grew afraid not at the sight of blood, but at the thought that one day he too might have to take up a blade or lie on the furnace room concrete like that bull. This law seemed to offer no third way, and that thought was colder than the camp night. The laundry room air was thick and heavy like a wet wool blanket. It smelled of bleach, damp rags, and cheap tobacco stuck in the wet concrete walls. A single bare bulb on a twisted wire cast sickly yellow light. Shadows from the huge, coffin-like washing machines stretched across the floor in ugly, jerking shapes. Outside, beyond the barred high window, a night blizzard howled, but down here in the administrative building's basement, its sound was lost under the hum of machinery and the steady plunk of water somewhere in the dark. Each drop kept time like a last heartbeat. Sadoy sat on an overturned wooden crate and tried to breathe evenly. The crate's cold cut through the thin fabric of his robe to his bones, but he did not move. About 10 men had gathered, no more. The elite of the camp's caste, men whose word weighed as much as the warden's order. They did not sit in a circle like at a friendly get-together. Each took his place, observing an invisible but palpable distance. The space between them crackled like air before a storm. Opposite Sadoy, pressed to a warm heating pipe, sat Miron, an old thief-in-law crowned before the war, gaunt, almost translucent, his parchment skin stretched over sharp cheekbones, but his deeply set eyes looked with such icy clarity that it seemed they saw not only you, but your rotten entrails. He neither smoked nor spoke. He simply sat with dried hands folded on his knees, the blue rings of old rings on his fingers. His stillness was more terrifying than any threat. He was the center of this little suffocating world. To Myron's left, slumped on a pile of dirty laundry, smoked a thin, harsh-voiced man. The new zone boss, younger by about 20 years, muscular, bull-necked, his cropped nape and heavy jaw showing the new wave. Brazen, brutal men for whom notions were less law than a tool to hold power. He exhaled short, harsh puffs and kept a heavy stare on the man standing in the middle of the laundry room. That man, Steyr, was the cause of the gathering. Short, wiry, about 40, with darting eyes and a sweat-slicked forelock clinging to his brow, he stood with his head tucked and hands trembling. "Speak, Reply. Why did you gather people?" Myron's voice came quiet, almost a whisper, but in the dead hush of the laundry, it cut like a razor. "There are charges. Specify them." Reply stubbed his smoke on the concrete, crushing the butt with his boot. He rose. His shadow on the wall swelled huge. There are charges, he nodded to Myron, speaking so everyone could hear. A case of Steyring. He's been dealing with the Red Quartermaster, with that rooster. He's been handing out men's things to the bitch. We have proof. The word hung in the air. In the thieves' world, there was no sin worse than taking from the administration. It meant a deal. It meant you ceased to be one of them. The fate of those who sold out was a single thing: a blade under the ribs or the shameful death by rope in the latrine. Sadoy felt a chill down his back. He knew Stier, not closely but enough. He'd always kept steady, was a proper vagrant. Could he have broken? Or was it a setup? Reply stood confident, sure of his rightness and strength. He clearly aimed for the old man's place. This meeting was his way of showing who was boss. Removing Stier would weaken the old guard to whom Stier was close. Who saw it? Myron asked again, eyes half closed as if dozing. A man saw. Reliable. Reply nodded toward a dark corner where a young kid crouched. It was Chirok, about 20, who'd come in for a small theft and attached himself to Reply's retinue. He sat pale as cloth, staring at the floor. Let the man speak, Myron said. Stand up, kid, and tell what you saw. Remember, you answer with your head. Lie, and you'll pay triple for casting a shadow on an honest man. Chirok rose on shaking legs. I was walking by the smoke room in the evening, he stammered. I heard voices. I peeked through the crack. The quartermaster Petukov and Stier were there. Petukov handed him packs of shag tobacco. He said, "This is for you, like we agreed, for info." Stier put it in his pocket. I saw 5 packs. The room went still. Stier convulsed with rage and despair. "You sent the kid," he gasped. "I'd make him shut up." Myron's voice didn't rise, but steel rang in it. Stier fell silent as if gagged. The old man slowly raised his head and looked at Stier. "Now speak your defense." Stier swallowed. He understood his life hung by a thread. "Father, brotherhood, no such thing. I argued with the quartermaster, tried to get the men their rights. I intervened on behalf of the men, warned him that if he touched them, he wouldn't live. I scared him off. The tobacco story is lies. That kid lies." Reply laughed theatrically. "Why would I get rid of you? Little pest, why would I? You removed yourself when you colluded with the Reds." The argument stalled, word against word. Evidence that could be written off as setup. All waited for Myron. He alone could untie this knot. The old man was silent for a minute, staring at the wall as if weighing each word in invisible scales. "Chirok," he said finally, addressing the kid. "Step up." Chirok, reeling, took a couple of steps forward. "You said the quartermaster gave 5 packs, right?" "Yes," the kid faltered. "And what info was that about? Didn't hear." "I left. I got scared," he said. Myron nodded, then turned his gaze to Stier. "You say you stood up for the men? It's noble. But tell me this. Did you deal with that quartermaster before?" "Never, father. First time." "Does he know you?" "How would he? I don't hide." "Then tell me, why would a Red quartermaster heed a threat from an unknown convict and back down? He'd hand you to the warden in a moment, and you'd be in the hole. Your story doesn't add up." Stier opened his mouth but had no answer. Myron's logic was iron. Administration only respects force. Force is thieves or those who work for thieves. Myron turned back to Chirok. "You say 5 packs? Which hand did the quartermaster hold them in when he passed them, left or right?" The boy hesitated. He hadn't expected that question. "Right," he blurted. "And which hand did Stier take them with?" "Right too," he stammered. Sadoy tensed. He saw the slip. Myron slowly turned to reply. "You trained the kid but missed a detail," Myron said. "A little thing?" Reply frowned. "What thing, father?" "The quartermaster's left arm doesn't work. From the Finnish war. He always hides it. He couldn't have held anything in his left. He always has a folder in his right. If he transmitted to the right, Stier, standing opposite for convenience, would have grabbed with his left. Your witness slips, means he didn't see, means he lies." A ringing silence fell. Eyes flicked between Reply and frozen Chirok. Reply realized the trap he'd set for Stier had snapped on him. "The boy got scared and muddled," he began, but Myron cut him off. "Shut up. You dragged a false witness to the gathering. You tried to lead the Brotherhood astray. You cast a shadow on a man without 100% proof, only with planted cigarettes and the words of a frightened Freyer. You broke the law. You wanted blood, reply. Thought yourself clever. Thought old man would be blind. I've watched that disabled quartermaster for 15 years. I know how he walks, breathes, which arm doesn't work. You don't because you can't see beyond your nose. You only want power. Reply stood crimson. He'd been caught in the filthiest kind of lie, in a setup, in the thieves' world that was almost as dirty as being a rat. The tobacco? He rasped, clutching for the last thread. And the tobacco? Myron fixed a heavy look on Stier, who still could not believe he had been spared. You, Stier, you did get something, but not from the rooster, right? Stier bowed his head. Right, father. From whom? From a package 3 days ago, through a Volnyashka doctor. He fell silent, ashamed to speak. I kept quiet because, well, it's not right to take secretly. It should have gone to the common fund, but I hoarded it. 5 packs. Shameful, father. Shameful, Myron repeated slowly. For ratting, you'll get a separate talk and you'll answer. But this is internal. It is not betrayal. And you, reply, you brought a lie to the meeting. You wanted to build your position on a lie. You used the kid and broke his life. Now who is he? A nothing. A man whose word is 0. Myron stood up. Everyone instinctively stepped back. Even Reply took a step backward. Meeting adjourned, the old man said in a low voice. We will decide Stier's fate separately. For ratting he will answer, but he remains family. But you, Reply, you misled the Brotherhood. You must answer for that. I am ready to answer, Reply offered, realizing he was losing everything. I know I'm ready. Myron approached him closely. Siri saw cold, dead fury flicker in the old man's faded eyes. I give you a choice. Either you leave our circle now, become a plain man, a Gus. No one will touch you if you keep your head down. Or, he didn't finish, but everyone understood what the alternative meant. And take your boy, Myron added, nodding toward the trembling Kyrok. He's yours now. Care for him. He's nobody else's. Reply stared at Myron with hatred, fear, and impotence. The man who'd been the zone's overseer had just been smashed against the wall, humiliated before the 10 main men of the camp. His authority was destroyed. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. He grabbed Kyrok by the collar, the boy was already sobbing, and dragged him out. When the heavy door closed behind them, a few seconds of silence hung in the laundry. Stier stood, head bowed, both crushed and saved. Myron walked to the crate where Sari sat. You saw everything? He asked softly. I saw, father, Sari answered, lifting his eyes. Learn, boy. Learn not only to hear what's said, but to see what's left unsaid. Reply was a fool. He tried to break in, but he was right about one thing. Stier was weak. He hoarded 5 packs that should have gone to the common fund. Tomorrow he'd sell his own mother for a pack of tea. He's rotten. I saved him today not for his sake. For what? Sari asked. Myron's corner of a smile was terrible. Reply wanted quick power. Men like him are dangerous. They're like rabid dogs, ready to burn down the whole house to fry an egg. They break order. I removed him not because he set up Stier, but because he set himself up and gave me a reason to remove him. I kept the balance. And Stier. Now he's my debtor to the grave. He'll do whatever I say. He will be my hands where I don't want a dirty mine. I didn't save a man, Siri. I gained an instrument, understand? Sari looked into the old man's cold, blank eyes and understood. This meeting had nothing to do with justice. It was not a trial, but a spectacle. A brutal, bloody show staged by a brilliant and merciless director. Myron patted him on the shoulder with a hand dry as a splinter. Go and remember, truth is not what actually is. Truth is what people believe. Our task is to make them believe what we need, to the thieves' way. He turned and slowly walked to the exit without looking back. The other thieves dispersed silently into the basement shadows. Sari stayed alone in the chlorine-smelling room. The drops still fell in the silence, but now their beat sounded to him like a hammer nailing the lid on a coffin. The coffin labeled Thieves' Law. For the first time, he distinctly felt the icy breath of the lie on which their whole world stood like permafrost. That lie was scarier than any prison or guard. The air in the barrack after the meeting and the settling of the Iron Man became thick as compressed cotton. It pressed on the ears and filled the nostrils with the scent of sweat, cheap tobacco, and unspoken fear. For 2 days the zone moved as if stunned. Men moved like shadows, eyes down, afraid to meet the thieves' gaze. Guards clicked rifles on the towers, but they did not rush into the barracks. The Kum, Captain Gvozdev, waited for the boil to burst on its own. He knew that after such blood, the thieves' world would either unite or start devouring itself. Either outcome served him. Leoka the Bald sat on a lower bunk, back against the cold, flaked wall. The shoulder cut by a knife from one of the iron men in that chaotic fight still throbbed with dull pain. The wound had been roughly sewn with a thread soaked in moonshine, and it burned under the dirty shirt. He hadn't slept nearly 48 hours. The image kept replaying. Chugun, a huge, broad-backed Urka, who a week earlier half the camp feared, kneeling in the center of a circle, his face muffled in a sack. Opposite him stood old Tashkensky, dry as a sunburned lizard, and his thin, rasping voice passing sentence, "You are not a thief, you're a worm who touched the common." And there was no one to intercede. Yesterday his own Sixers had driven blades under his ribs. Leoka had seen it, not in rage, not in frenzy, but businesslike, almost lazily, as if stabbing a sack of potatoes. That was scarier than any brawl. It was work. A familiar creak sounded nearby. Old Tashkensky sat down quietly on the edge of a bunk like a ghost. In the dim barrack, his face mapped with wrinkles looked carved of stone. He reached into his bosom for a pouch, rolled a crooked cigarette, and struck a match. The flare for a moment revealed his deep, keen eyes. "See that? You'll lose sleep for a month," Leoka rasped without turning his head. "Good." The old man exhaled smoke. "Means the soul's still alive. Some swallow the stew the next day as if nothing happened." "Do you think that's right?" Leoka asked. "Right to do this to him?" The old man threw out the smoke. "You must think more than swing fists in our business. You didn't understand, did you? Why so with him?" Leoka was silent. He really didn't understand. Yes, Chugun was a rat. He went for someone else's share, wanted to take the common pot Tashkensky managed. But the cruelty of the punishment had been beyond human. "He broke the law," the old man said matter-of-factly, as if explaining why the sun rises in the east. "You think our law is a list of rules? Don't work for the Reds, don't have a family, don't take a gun from the state. That's for men, for the kids without whiskers. That's the tip of the iceberg. Our law, Leoka, is the code of honor of the dead. We who called ourselves thieves, we died for that free life. We have no passport, no home, no wife or children, no future. We have one name and the brotherhood. If you betray the brotherhood, you betray the only thing left. You become nobody. A nobody must be cleansed." "But he was one of us," Leoka objected. "How many years in camps?" "One of ours." The old man smiled without joy. "He was one of ours while he lived like a man. The moment his head filled with thoughts that he's smarter and could hog the common, he stopped being one of ours. He became a rat. And do you know what you do to rats in a closed space where there's nothing to eat?" Leoka fell silent. He knew. The old man's voice hardened as if stamping words in metal. "The common fund is not just a cash box. It's our heart, our blood. From it, heat goes to other zones, to prisons, to hospitals. It helps families of those on the outpost or serving life terms. It lubricates the system with the guards so we can get parcels or medicine for the sick. The common is our circulatory system. Chugun wanted to cut that vein and take all the blood for himself. That's not theft, that's murder of our way of life. For that, there is only death. A shameful death, so others won't follow." He flicked his butt and ground it into the filthy concrete with his boot. "You ask why they call me Old Tashkensky? I broke in Tashkent in 47. I was 22. 7 of us on a meeting. Now, only I remain. 2 were cut down in 53 when the war turned. 1 the cops beat to death on interrogation. He never spoke. The 4th drank himself to death on the outside. The 5th we sentenced ourselves for betting a boss's wife. He thought it a game. The thieves' law is no game. If it says don't have a family, it means don't have one, because through family they'll find a hook to break you. A thief must be alone like a wolf. His home is the taiga. His family is the pack. If he builds a warm den and takes a she-wolf, he becomes a house dog and will end chained. The old man spoke, and Leoka felt the barrack's cold bite into his bones. He remembered his short life, a mother he barely recalled, the first theft of a loaf, the first stint in juvenile detention, the intoxicating feeling of power when he formed his gang and terrified a whole neighborhood. He'd thought that was life. Now he understood it was a prelude. The real life, terrible and irreversible, began here. What else? What other laws that aren't told? He whispered. The old man looked at him long, studying. There are many, and they're not told. They're learned in blood. For example, don't humiliate a working man. Heard of that? Leoka nodded. What does it mean? It doesn't mean you can't take his last if you are stronger and he deserves it. But you can't humiliate him for nothing. You can't make him do dirty work, sing like a rooster, lick your boots. The working man is the zone's backbone. He feeds us while we reject the regime. If we push them without reason, they'll rise or turn to the Reds, and then we're finished. Understand our balance? They get order, justice, protection from other arbitrariness. For us, they are a resource, cold calculation, no romance. A scuffle sounded in the far corner, a muffled cry and the wet slap of a towel hitting the flesh. The old man and Leoka turned. Near the washstands, in the darkest, stinkiest corner, 3 thieves from Pasha's entourage, Siberiak and another, had hemmed in a thin, spectacled weakling called Chibis. He crouched clutching his head. Sverchak, a lanky, crooked calf, was beating him methodically with a wet towel. Each blow left a dark, wet blot on the gray robe. What's going on? Leoka asked softly. A question, the old man answered quietly. Go see. You'll learn something. They rose and strolled over. The bloaties stepped back, letting the old man through. Leoka stood behind him. Chebis trembled. His glasses had slid. One lens was cracked. He was a kind of camp intellectual who'd landed here over a petty domestic charge. Such men either broke quickly and went into service for the thieves or quietly faded on common tasks. Chebis tried to survive by serving, mending boots, fetching books from the library. Well, Ryder, Sverchak drawled, playing with the towel. Any new thoughts? Where did the bread ration from the stash go? I didn't take it, thieves, Chebis whimpered, eyes on the floor. I swear on my mother I didn't. Don't swear on your mother, scum, Pasha Siberiak said calmly, without hurry. He was opposite the old man, young, strong, with a smooth, almost boyish face and a permanent bored expression. But his pale eyes held a chill that made Leoka uneasy. Then, explain why crumbs from our ration were found under your mattress? Old crumbs, Chibis babbled. I don't know. You're a rat, Siberiak declared in the same bored tone. You stole from your own, from those who gave you a chance to breathe here. You ate our bread and then stole it from us. Chibis went silent, only his shoulders trembling. He knew it was over. The law is the same for everyone, said Grandpa Tashkensky, stepping forward. His voice wasn't loud, but in the ensuing silence, it struck like a bell. For the thief, the man, and the stray snitch. Ratting is a plague. If it's not burned out, it devours all. He looked at the Siberian. The man barely nodded. Lift him, the Siberian ordered the cricket. Chibis was jerked to his feet. He was white as cloth. You know what happens for this, said the Siberian. We won't cut you. You're not worth dirtying the knife on. But from this moment, you're no longer human. He gestured. 2 other criminals grabbed Chibis by the arms. The cricket swung and struck him hard with a wet towel. His glasses shattered. Chibis squealed like a piglet. Into the corner, the Siberian threw him. And stay there until lights out. Tomorrow, you go to the Rooster's barrack. That's your place. They dragged him to the corner. He didn't resist, collapsed like a rag doll. They placed him facing the wall. He froze, head bowed. His life in the camp was over. From now on, he was a pariah. No one could touch him. No one could speak. No one could give him food. He was worse than dead. The criminals dispersed. Pasha Siberian approached Grandpa. All fair, Grandpa? By the law, Pasha, by the law, Tashkensky replied. He turned to the bald man, pale, fists clenched. See? That's the code in action. Not the pretty words at the meetings, but simple, everyday justice. They didn't steal a loaf. They stole his right to be human. They returned to their bunks. Grandpa rolled a cigarette. Think it was pleasant for us? He asked without looking at Leoka. Think Siberian is a sadist? No. He's just doing his job. He's the watcher. He keeps order. If he forgives a rat today, tomorrow they'll steal the stash, and the day after, they'll turn on him. Our world runs not on friendship, but on fear and the inevitability of punishment. Every simple man knows one wrong move, and you cease to exist. You're either killed or lowered. No third option. Bald stared at Chibi's cowering in the corner. An hour ago, he was human, beaten, miserable, but human. Now he was nothing, and it all came down to a few crumbs of bread. "It's cruel," he whispered. "Life is cruel," cut Grandpa, "especially ours. You must understand something, Bald, if you want to survive and rise. The thieves' law isn't about justice. It's about power. It's a tool to keep thousands of desperate, vicious men locked in a stone bag from devouring each other. We are the bones of power here inside, but our power must be absolute. Any doubt, any leniency, and it collapses. We strike first, strike to death, so they fear us." He paused, inhaling deeply. Smoke wrapped his face. For a moment, Leoka felt not an old man, but an ancient, tired demon. "Law, Leoka," Grandpa suddenly spoke in a quiet, bitter voice. "Where you turn, that's what happens. Today we turned against a rat. Tomorrow someone may turn it against us, against me, against you. Always be ready. Trust no one fully, not even me." This last phrase hit Bald harder than anything he'd seen all day. He looked at the old man, his eyes closed, and his face showed a mortal weariness. Leoka realized Grandpa wasn't teaching rules. He was confessing. Decades of burning inside, leaving only a hard shell. Leoka leaned back, staring at the soot-dark ceiling. He didn't see boards, he saw faces. The iron face turning into a bloody mask, Chibi's face draining of life, Pasha Siberian's cold, indifferent face like a knife blade, and Grandpa Tashkensky, old lawkeeper, confessing the truth. The code is a tool of power. Its wielder can turn it against anyone. His shoulder burned. The barrack reeked of fear. Leoka felt, for the first time, the icy thrill of criminal life and its grave chill. He knew stepping on this path signed a sentence not only for freedom, but for the soul. Every companion could become an executioner at any moment. That was the code's harshest unspoken part. The air stretched tight, like a string on a cheap guitar, vibrating with unspoken threats and sticky animal fear. It began not with shouting, not with a fight. It began with silence, dead vacuum silence before blood. The zone lived its usual ugly life in the morning. Men bent in half dragged themselves to work. Snitches fussed near the criminals' barracks. Somewhere, a coughing, tubercular wretch hacked in a corner of the smokehouse. By noon, everything froze. First, the loudspeakers stopped, usually spitting bombastic marches or tedious lectures on idleness. Dogs ceased barking in the towers, and the metal clang of the industrial zone fell silent. In this sudden quiet, every rustle, every step on the packed dust echoed leaden. Leoka Sidoy stood by his barrack window, fingers blue with tattoos, nervously twisting the rough robe's edge. He saw nothing unusual, but felt everything. Skin, gut, every scar. The sixth sense that saved his life countless times. Whispers of cops, betrayal, death. Something was coming. "They're moving someone," croaked the squat, sinewy Caucasian with burning eyes. He stood beside, hand on a hidden knife at his waist. "Someone's coming," Antip, the old thief, murmured, not looking outside, cleaning his nails with a sharpened match. His calm was more threatening than Kamo's fury. Antip was near 60, 40 of which behind bars. His face resembled an old cracked map of roads leading to hell. Kam was plotting something. He hadn't smiled like that in ages. Kum, Major Belkovich, head of the operational unit, zone boss, lean, aristocratic features, icy pathologist eyes, didn't yell, didn't strike. He broke people quietly, methodically, with a smile. He knew all cracks in the criminal world, all offenses, all debts. And now he seemed ready to press the sorest spot. The camp gates screeched open. Not one, but 3 convoys entered. Pushed by shepherd dogs and guard shouts, about 30 men poured out. They wore the same gray slave clothes but carried themselves differently. No submissive bent, no hidden strength. They had brazen, defiant confidence. Como spat, hand gripping his knife tighter. Word passed like a venomous snake. Those who were once part of the thieves' family, but betrayed, took collaboration with administration, became goats, activists. By thieves' law, no one spoke to them, no one noticed them, they were cut. The bitch war that swept camps after Stalin's death claimed thousands. Though quieter now, hatred simmered, ready to ignite. Major Belkovich just threw a lit torch to that smoldering ash. He didn't just move 36 hardened bastards into the zone, he did it demonstratively. At the head of the newcomers, Vaska Rigi, former thief crowned before the war. Rumor personally killed 2 law-keepers to curry favor with authorities. Now, a butt in Krasnaya, right hand of the administration, sent not to serve time, but to break the black path. Come once the slaughter started, Antip said calmly, flicking his match so they would strike first. Then internal troops come, lock everyone in cells and punishment blocks, break bones, and the zone turns red. He gets a new star on his shoulder straps, and we get 10 years in added isolation. What to endure? Who watches? Old man, you forgot the law? The bitch underfoot. Not debatable. I haven't forgotten. Law is wisdom, not mindless slaughter. We're being provoked. They want us to sign our own sentence. Think, Antip intervened softly, out of experience. Sidoy was silent. He saw the truth in both words. Camo spoke from heart. Thieves' honor demanding blood. Antip spoke from mind, survival in a system stronger than any thief. Silence wasn't an option. The Brotherhood waited for the lawkeeper's word. Men cowered in corners, awaiting whose power would dominate. Delay equals weakness. Sidoy finally said, "A meeting is needed in the boiler room. All our men attend, drive the common men through. No word or look to the bitches. Complete ignore. Any violation, punishment, up to lowering." Zone froze in tense anticipation. First days passed in ringing silence. They walked through the zone in a pack, wolves, with empty space forming around them. Mess hall, one table, all around cleared. Baths, half the room freed. No one entered until they left. Psychological pressure of insane force. Smirks replaced with confusion, then rage. Major Belkovich displeased. Plan failed. Expected riot, blood, excuse for sweep. Got quiet, organized sabotage. Nothing to pin. Legally untouchable. Fourth day, a guard pulled Sidoy from the barrack to meet head of operational unit. It was a bad sign. Talks with the Coom never ended well. The whole Brotherhood watched him with heavy eyes. Going to talk to Elgov was almost disgraceful, but refusing the power of Nusa meant 6 months in the burr and the stigma of a coward. Gray nodded silently and went. Belkevich's office was another world. Polished parquet, bookshelf with Lenin's works, a decanter of water on the table. The major sat in a chair in a perfectly pressed tunic, smoking an expensive cigarette. "Sit, Sidov," he said, pointing to the chair. Voice was soft, concise. "I want to talk like a man." Gray sat on the edge. Silence. By thieves' code, talking to the Coom was only out of necessity. "I see you're smart," Belkevich continued, blowing smoke rings. "Not like some hotheads. You act right, calm, quiet, I respect that." Sidov kept silent, staring at the wall. "But you understand, Alexei, this is temporary." Major leaned forward. "I can't allow a second power in my zone. I have orders from the top to eradicate thieves' traditions, and I'll do it, with your help or without. But with your help, there will be less blood." Pause. Words sank in. "Here's the layout. Rigi's group are my people. They'll enforce order. Your job, don't interfere. You and your friends, sit quiet. Don't touch them. They won't touch you. I won't touch your barracks. Your links to the outside remain. Your men won't be harmed. We just split the zone into black and red and live in peace. How's that?" A trap. Diabolically clever. Belkovich offered not just a truce. He offered to nullify the thieves' law itself, to recognize the power of the pigs, to agree to their existence. That was the compromising trap turning a thief into a, "I don't understand, citizen boss," Sidov replied evenly. "I'm a simple prisoner, serving time. No commoners, belong to no groups." Belkovich smirked. "Don't break the act, Sidov. I know everything. How you were crowned in 1958 in Butyrka, your stash in Kharkov. Antip sees you as successor. I know, that's why I talk to you, not to that mountain ram Como. I offer life, calm life, for you and your men, in exchange for neutrality. Otherwise, he stubbed the cigarette in the ashtray. Otherwise, I tighten the screws, start with you. I have a press hada in the basement. 5 thugs promised reduced terms for a couple of corpses. They'll turn you into a cripple overnight. I'll report you fell downstairs, then I'll take Antip. He's old, won't last. Then the rest. I'll crush you one by one like kittens. No one will speak. The threat was real. Sidov knew it. He'd seen men coming out of such press hadas, or rather being carried. I'll think, he said. Only phrase he could afford. Neither agreement nor refusal. It bought time. Think, Belkovich nodded. 2 days. Accept my terms or I start a war. Now go. Sidov walked back, each step echoing in his head. Trapped. Agree means betraying all beliefs, losing respect. Refuse means doom and possible death. External pressure from administration became personal. It targeted his heart. Entering the thieves' corner, all went silent. Antip and Kamo stared. He offers a deal, Sidov murmured. Split the zone, we leave pigs, they leave us. 2 days. If not, he'll crush each in preshhadas. Who's furious? Deal with scum. Already disgraced by the talk. What deal? Cut them, he said. First year's instinct. Quiet, Antip cut him off. Let him speak. I'll think, said Lyoka. Antip studied him, heavy, analytical. Not fear, but the torment of choice. Right not to refuse immediately, finally said the old thief. You bought time, but no deal is possible. Understood, nodded Sidov. Then only one way left, said Antip, voice steel. We strike first, but not how Cum wants, not massacre. We strike at his power, his reputation. Plan conceived that night in fevered whispers, bold, near suicidal. Next day, evening assembly, all zone lined up, the impossible happened. One worker, quiet, beaten man. Skvorets, often robbed and beaten, suddenly broke, struck Vaska Rigi square in the face. Rigi fell, surprised by audacity from a nobody. His men lunged at Skvorets, then, as if on command, from various lines yelling, "Hit the pigs!" Another 20 men attacked. Not thieves, just desperate workers. Chaos. Guards shouted, sirens wailed. Thieves and authorities stood stone-faced, unmoved. Looked like a spontaneous rebellion of workers against pig tyranny. Belkevich ran out, enraged, saw he was outplayed. Couldn't order shooting at unarmed workers. Couldn't blame thieves, they stood statues. Ordered security to break up the fight. Soldiers with dogs and batons entered, beating indiscriminately men and pigs. Skvorets and other ringleaders dragged to isolation. Ground soaked in blood, but strategically thieves won. Showed the zone they weren't omnipotent. Even a simple man could resist. And they did it with others' hands, sparing themselves. Belkovich retaliated that night. Special forces raided thieves' barrack, dragged sleeping Kamo. He struggled, cursed, beaten with rifle butts until gasping. Blood trail on floor. For what? Cried Sidov, leaping. Officer turned. For organizing mass disorder and murder. What murder? Chilled Antip. Earlier, med unit found body of Skvorets, the one who started the fight. Beaten to death. Knife nearby with your friend's fingerprints. Como anticipated. Barrack fell silent. Clear, brazen police setup. They planted knife to pin murder, isolate a thief. External pressure became open war. First move by Kum. Sidov stared out window. Sirens, barking dogs. Conversation with Major was prelude. Real hell began. 2 days given by Belkovich expired tomorrow. Choice. Save Brotherhood via Devil's Deal or start annihilation war. Few survive. Stakes just rose. Como's life. Air thick, heavy, like wet cotton. Smelled of hot metal, cheap diesel, despair. Lyoka Sidov saw valet, young, lean, testing knife on wooden beam, fingers tattooed, God condemned by state. Naive boyhood faith. Path is not choice, but challenge to system. Sidov saw himself 20 years ago. Angry, convinced, unaware rightness here costs less than a loaf. Good iron. Valet pulled knife. Perfect for hog hide, Gray muttered, eyes on Gray shops. Not now. Cum waits to provoke us. Hog under him. We watch how he robs our men. Valet enraged. Yesterday cripple removed, sugar ration taken. Only one-legged, no one to speak except us. Where is law if we allow this? Next to rusty barrel, smoking, Zakar exhaled thick, acrid smoke. Old thief silent. Face, map of old roads, showed only cosmic fatigue. Law, you say? Zakar spat. Law is for men. Hog is no longer human, function, tool. Cum pries at us like crowbar, sees cracks. You, valet, are hot. Hotheads are expected. Wait, sits and waits. Sidov laid heavy hand on shoulder. Think with head, not just heart. Hog is bait. They bait us. If we snap, burr 6 months, maybe new term. Without us, our men get flattened. Wait, fine moment, valet spat, hid knife. Trusted Sidov, like father never had. That trust, main weakness. Believed in irreproachability of code. Justice in thieves' world, that wrong punished. Yet, in this system, justice long a bargaining chip. That evening, it happened. Hog, feeling impunity, crossed line. With his minions, cornered young Sergei Skrepach. Recent minor arrest for fight. Boy was nobody, beaten, scared, stuck with Sidov. He once defended him. Hog didn't need bread, needed provocation. Beat him slowly with pleasure in front of all. Torn aluminum cross from neck, tossed in latrine puddle. What, pups? Watch. Hog eyes blood-filled, sneers. Anyone speaks for this chick, dad, Sidov? Sidov at his gnar, cheeks muscles twitch, saw pleading eyes of Skrepach, sneering faces of minions, fear in men, valet staring. Unspoken, now, or silence again. Stand, Sidov hissed, catching valet. Trap? What trap? Valet barked. They kill our boy. Valet ran to industrial zone. Sidov understood. Valet planned to cut wires. Dark chaos to save boy. Punish hog unseen. Desperate. Calculated. Sidov chased. Too late. Night torn by scream. Pre-death terror. Found him by locksmith workshop corner. Valet on trampled snow. Blood darkening. Not knife stab. Too simple. Fair. Nearby, rusty rebar. Thick, hair stuck. Beaten by several. Figures emerge from shadow. Not Hog, his minions. Done their job, waited. Then Hog's voice from 20 meters. Wall. Lawman arrives? Late. Your pup thought smartest. Just dumb meat, like you. Sidov looked at Valet's body. Tattoo still visible. Now, mockery. Boy who believed in higher court. Torn like dog. Killed not for deed, not in fair fight. Beaten as livestock, on orders serving cops. Sidov raised eyes to Hog. No rage, only cold dead void. Understood. Wires valet aimed to cut, bait, they waited. Hog smoked, discarded butt, left. Feared nothing. Knew Sidov wouldn't act now, step is burr. Administration plan worked perfectly. Removed active, loyal man. Showed thieves' law here no longer works. Sidov's authority nothing against rebar in guards' hands. Sidov sank to knees beside Valet. He touched his still warm cheek, trying to wipe the blood, but only smeared it. Light flicked on in the barrack. Gorda's siren wailed. Shortly, for order, they said. No one ran, no one rushed to help. The camp froze, digesting what had happened. Everyone understood. 02, Zers 01, 14 signal. He sat on the snow until the guards came with a stretcher. They threw Valet's body like a sack of potatoes and carried it off. One young sergeant kicked the scattered rebar. Again, you devils couldn't share something, he sneered. Sidoy didn't answer. He got up, his legs wobbly, and walked not to his barrack, but to Zakar. The old thief sat on the bunks, staring into nothing. He knew everything. News in the camp spread faster than the wind. We need a meeting, Sidoy said, his voice alien, creaking. We need to question the boar, by law. Zakar slowly lifted his faded eyes to him. No pity, no surprise, only deep, endless bitterness. A meeting? He whispered. Which meeting, Leosha? What do you mean? A thief's meeting. Declare the boar a bitch and a bastard. Pass judgment. And who will come to this meeting? Zakar smirked bitterly. Grisha McIntosh, who polished a Cum's boots yesterday for an extra parcel? Or Pasha the Crooked, who rats on his own men for a pack of cigarettes? Or will you call those who stood by today watching the boar crush the kid, afraid to speak a word? Who will come, Leosha? Sidoy was silent. He knew Zakar was right. The Brotherhood was scared, fractured. Everyone thought only of their own skin. We are thieves. We must uphold the law, Sidoy repeated stubbornly, clinging to this thought like a drowning man to a straw. Zakar looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. He sighed heavily, rose, and approached the barred window. Outside, the southern wind swept, erasing tracks in the snow, erasing Valet's blood. 02, 03, 04. Law, Zakar muttered, staring into the white haze. Do you still believe in it? Like Valet did. Do you know what a real thief's meeting is, Leosha? Sidoy frowned. It's a fair court. No, that was a lie, Zakar said quietly but clearly. A beautiful lie we all wanted to believe. Meetings were a spectacle, a show of force. They only worked when we were strong, united, when the administration feared us because a riot wasn't convenient. Then we could judge, punish. We set our rules in their house, but that was long ago. He turned to Sidoy. His eyes burned with a feverish fire. Then came the new bosses, new Kumi, smart ones. They understood. No need to break us, just divide us. They bought some, intimidated others, created bitches, gave them power, weapons, protection. And what became of our law? What is the word of a thief against a guard's bat in the hands of a dog? The meeting today. Just a pretext to rewrite all dissenters and lock them in solitary. A trap for fools still believing in tales of the thief's brotherhood. Zakar's words fell in the barrack's silence like stones in a deep well, each word stronger than any blow. It shattered everything Sidoy's world rested on, his life. 30 years in prisons and camps, dozens of meetings deciding others' fates, hundreds of times risking life for the code. All lies. All meetings lies? Sidoy asked, despair in his voice. Not everything, but their essence was a lie, Zakar corrected. We weren't judges, just wolves dividing the pack. We thought we lived by our law, but in reality, we played a game permitted by those in charge. Now the rules changed. The masters no longer need wolves. They need chained dogs like the boar. They unleash the dogs on Sidoy's. Simple. He sat on the bunk again. Pity for Valet. A good kid, righteous, died for an idea that no longer exists. Died for a lie. If you try to gather a meeting to question the boar now, you'll die for the same lie. No one will even remember. Sidoy stood mid-barrack, a rock eroded by water. Inside, something cracked and collapsed. His life, built on strict unchanging rules, crumbled to dust. Betrayal wasn't that the boar killed Valet. Not that the administration used a bitch for dirty work. The real, terrible betrayal. The law he served was a fiction. An illusion that worked only as long as it suited the camp's real masters. Valet's death proved the worthlessness of all he believed in. He left Zakar's barrack, saying nothing. The southern wind bit his face, snow stinging, but he felt no cold. Inside, ice. Every step echoed in his head. Lies. All lies. He stopped, looking at the watchtower, the spotlighted figure of the guard. They were real power, neither thieves nor meetings, those with guns. And their servants, the Kumi, guards like the boar. Sidoy realized he had only two paths. First, submit. Accept the new rules, live out his term watching his world devour itself. Become a living monument to a bygone era, like Zakar. Second, a different path. If the law is dead, he is no longer bound by it. No code, no justice, no brotherhood remains. Only one thing. Personal vengeance. Not thieves, not human, but like mad dogs. Quietly, without witnesses, without trial. He looked toward the barrack where the boar celebrated. In his dead eyes, for the first time in years, a spark ignited. Not fire of justice, but cold, predatory gleam of a man with nothing left to lose, not even faith. Valet's life paid. Now it's time to settle with the boar. Payment not by thief's law, but by the sole law remaining to Sidoy. The law of the burned-out soul. Night in the zone seeped cold and silence, worse than any scream. Frosty draft wound through the barrack, under skin, to bones, freezing the remnants of human warmth. The dull bulb, behind steel mesh, cast quivering shadows on the planks, turning sleeping convicts into heaps of lifeless bodies. Only near the red-hot stove, a cluster of local thieves gathered. Gray, young but recognized authority, silently watched the fire. His face, sliced by fresh scars, was impenetrable as granite. Next to him, hunched on a low bench, sat Zub. Silent, bulldog-like, his fists as respected as sharp words. He methodically sharpened the aluminum spoon handle on concrete, turning it into a deadly spike. The scrape was the only sound breaking hundreds' murmurs. Across, Mikey, old thief-in-law, a living legend, lay half-reclining on his bunk. His words still carried the weight of the camp's court. They called him grandfather. But the legend was fading. Dry, shaking cough tore his chest. He pressed a gray rag to his mouth, leaving dark, threatening stains. Everyone knew he was leaving, not by knife or bullet, but by consumption that devoured from within. Another brutal inspection occurred. "By the book!" a husky voice called. Young Schneer, serving the elite, tore mattresses. Gray didn't flinch. Any inspection tests, strength, risk of losing quarters, hidden shivs, nervy tension. "Let them search," he said calmly, eyes on fire. "What's ours stays ours. Who to greet? Mind your own ass, not our mattresses." Corner chuckled. Gray's word was law. Today his thoughts were on the dying Mikey, on the path that led them all here to this frozen, stinking hell where human life worth less than a pack of cheap cigarettes. "Zub," Gray asked, "you weren't a kid when you first arrived?" "Serious." Zub stopped sharpening. He met Gray's heavy, expressionless gaze, his face like a crude stone mask. He rarely spoke of himself, his history etched in knuckles, scars, readiness to bite anyone doubting his right to breathe. "How did you start?" Gray asked. "Like everyone else? Hungry." War ended. Hunger didn't. My father, amputee from the front, drowned in drink. Mother worked double shifts for bread cards until collapse. I was 10. I remember winter, dog cold. I stole bread at the market. Got caught. Kicked till ribs cracked, still held bread. Ate it there in snow, blood and dirt mixed, understood one simple thing. If you want to live, take it yourself. No one will give. Take it so they fear returning it. First real theft, 16. Took a stall with friends. Watch popped out, old man. Hit him with crowbar, misjudged. 10 years for death. On juvenile, realized same market, but harsher. Either eat or be eaten. Chose first. Never regretted. They took life from me, I from them, but I did so with eyes open while they hid behind their law. That's my confession. Spat. Resumed sharpening. No regret, just cold fact report. Not complaint, a predator's account. Gray shivered. He wasn't an angel, blood on hands, but in Zub was a terrifying primitive simplicity. Perfect soldier of this world, asking no questions. Gray recalled his path. Life different. Leah family, full, fed, working, father engineer, mother teacher. Grew right boy, almost straight A. Then 8th grade, beaten by seniors, money stolen, humiliated. Came home, blood and tears smeared. Father. Be smarter, son. Avoid conflict. Something broke. He didn't want smarter, wanted stronger. Joined boxing. A year later, found offenders, broke jaws. Not jailed, young, spared. Tasted power, fear in eyes. Respected on street. Friends fearless. First drink, first fight, first police visit, then first real hit. Tried to grab a factory man's apartment. Smooth until he returned. Fight. Partner Vaska stabbed man dead. Vaska caught, confessed all, Gray silent, took all blame. 25 years camp sentence. Here, refusal and silence valued. Recognized right, proper boy. Proved unbreakable. Chose path not from hunger, like Zub, but pride, desire to prove world he isn't victim. Now he watches dying old man, hears metal rasp. Past life feels one big mistake. Traded freedom, mother's love, future for respect of killers, thieves, sit by smelly stove, decide who lives, who rots. Oro 2, 1454. Suddenly Makey convulsed, chest-shattering cough. Bent double. Gray caught his thin shoulders. After episode, Mikey removed rag, soaked in bubbling red blood. Looked at him blank, then at Gray. All, he whispered, Stop, grandfather, Gray said. You'll make it, not from here. Mikey crooked smile, yellow teeth. No, Gray, this time I won't make it. That guard inside stronger than any cum, knows his term. He gasped, swallowing stale air. Sit, talk, while I can. Gray crouched before bunk. Zub and others froze. Mikey's last words, a will. Gray, proper thief, Mikey began, eyes sharp. You suffer for idea, for our thief law, for justice. Think honor exists in our business? Honor. Bitter smile. I thought so too, once, young, foolish like you, after 45 saw what was happening. Bloody war. Pause, gathering strength. Barrack knew, the great split in thief world, returning front thieves tried to set rules, lawmen slaughtered them. Sacred war for purity of code. Told, they are traitors, Mikey continued, voice metal hard. Took guns, swore allegiance. Not thieves anymore. Had to cut like pigs. We cut thousands. Barracks, industrial zones, transit camps, Blood River. I sent 20 souls personally for idea, law. Believed we purged world of filth. Coughed again, short, angry. Gray realized Mikey's truth. Truth, they were stronger, more, organized veterans of war. Knew how to kill, wanted power. Old thieves like Yaponchik, scared to be dethroned. Started war, called it struggle for code purity. Really struggle for power, control of funds, decide who lives, dies. Law became a club for beating undesirables. Gray froze. Sacrilege, denial of all belief. Code immutable, above men, only truth. Not so, grandfather, he said. We're meetings, courts, all by code. Mikey laughed, bubbling, hoarse. Meetings? Eyes glint with evil tears. Yes, meetings. Let me tell one. Ural thief Grisha Northern, honest, proper, all life in camps, never bent, opposed war. Said cutting brotherhood inhuman. Cops pitted us, we happy, many respected, listened, dangerous to those starting slaughter. Meeting called. Suddenly a report surfaced, supposedly from Northern, asking Cum to transfer him to easier camp. Request to cops, end of thief. Immediately on meeting, stripped rank. Week later, stabbed in cell. I knew report fake. Made by one very authoritative lawman, Northern obstructed. I stayed silent, feared. Could be sent after Grisha. Stayed silent, let them kill honest man and name a law. Barrack fell silent. Even Zub stopped sharpening, staring at Mikey, words shattering their world. All meetings, son. Mikey leaned close, whisper like hiss. All, without exception, where big deals decided, were lies. A show for people like you, like Zub, for the masses to believe, to follow into fire and water, while we divided life's money on top. You wonder why thieves shouldn't work? To avoid messing with power? Nonsense. To have time for intrigue. Why no family? So, not vulnerable, nonsense. Life devoted to one thing. Fight for place under sun in this rat pit. Created code impossible to follow. Always loophole to drown inconvenient. Don't cooperate with power, we yelled, yet through our people leaked competitors. Don't steal from your own. Taught, yet betrayed each other for control. All this, eyes swept Barrack, all a huge bloody circus, and we are clowns, trainers in it. Gray recoiled from old man. World crumbled. Everything he suffered, principles ready to die for, all fake. Sacrifice wasted. Not fighting for justice, just pawn and dirty game. Ears ringing. Looked at Zub, mouth open, face confused. Others averted eyes. I confess to you, Gray, Mikey croaked, reclining on ragged pillow. Saw himself in you, same fool. You my successor. Soon crown on you, you'll choose. Play game fully, lie, betray, kill for power, call it thief's law. Either he fell silent and his breathing became irregular, or you try to change something, and they'll devour you, like Grisha Severny and hundreds of others who tried to be honest. Now, live with it. You're next. Choose your performance. His eyes closed. His chest rose weakly. The end. He spat out his last truth. Siri alone in the ruins of faith. He stood up, legs like wax. Walked to the stove, opened the door. Heat hit his face. The flames consumed the logs and life. a furious fire leaving only gray ashes. The old man's confession was worse than any sentence. It took the meaning of life, turned everything to ash. He stared into the fire. Behind him, the old thief died, a new one was born. How would he be? An honest corpse or a lying king? The answer was more terrifying than watchtowers, dogs, or guards. Alone in a world without truth or law, only cold, darkness, and the scraping of a blade on concrete. 1968 ended slowly and dirty. Winter had bitten into the Urals like an old wolf. The camp shrank under the icy breath. Snow, gray from dust, like a shroud. Searchlights illuminated dead patches of the perimeter, where even shadows dared not move. The air cracked with each breath, turning to frost on jackets and eyelashes. In the corner of the infirmary barrack, smelling of medicine, urine, and hopelessness, the old man lay for the third week on the official bunk. His real name had been erased from memory. Only the Old One remained, a nickname that had become his essence. Gray once meant wisdom, now it was only parchment-like skin. He was a thief in law, old formation, held sway in the harshest Soviet camps. His word cut sharper than any blade, his gaze silenced the toughest gangsters. He survived Kengir, Vorkuta, Kolyma, survived dog wars, broke the Reds, put lawless men in their place. 27 years, the zone took, or he gave, he no longer knew. Beside him sat Chish on an upturned bucket, overseer of the infirmary, slowly rolling the last bits of tobacco. "Water," croaked the Old One without opening his eyes. Chish fetched icy water. The Old One drank greedily, burning his throat, coughing. Tuberculosis, the flux, eating him from within. The doctor, incurable, a month, maybe 2. "Thanks, son," the Old One sighed, leaning on the thin pillow. Memories ran through his mind, meetings in forest huts, coronation under bunks, bloody fights, knives glinting in firelight, faces of friends preserved, enemies sent to the afterlife. His life, rituals, principles, oaths, honor, justice. Corners of his mouth twitched, the door creaked. A massive figure entered, Zver, the new thief. Not yet 30, crowned 2 years ago. Strong, brutal, ambitious. Old laws, only tools. Voice low, velvet hoarse, no respect. Only concealed impatience. Chish instinctively stepped in front of the bunk. "A man is sick." Zver didn't look at him, removed his hat, shook snow off, threw it on the empty bunk. Eyes small, evil, fixed on the Old One. "Step back, Chish, we talk." Zver close, smelled of frost and power. "Hear me?" "Bad, Old One," he began. Sari turned his head, faded blue eyes, no fear, only infinite weariness. "Order? What order do you want, Zver? To oppress men, take the communal fund?" Zver's face hardened. Keban behind him reached under his coat. "Filter your words, father," Zver growled. "We both stand for the idea, for justice. Justice means everyone in their place, the overseer on his feet, not spitting blood on rags. Justice." Sari smiled cruelly. He propped himself on his elbows, breathing heavily. "I'll tell you how I was crowned in 1947 under Magadan." Silence, raspy breathing, wind outside. Kaban and Ryboy tense. "We were 3 candidates, me, Mishka Yakut, Vaska Riji, clean by all rules. Assembly organized by old Hassan, 20 most respected vagabonds. For Yakut spoke Grisha Kine, for Riji, the fiddler. For me, no one. Orphan, no support, yet justice was on my side. 3 months earlier, I punished the traitor who turned in our boy, Kumu, all by the rules." Coughing again. Chish tried to help. Sari stopped him. Old Hassan nodded. "The Old One will be the thief." Everyone surprised. Yakut brazen, Riji clever. I was just right. Asked, "Why me?" Old, "You're controllable. Believe in the idea. For a Foss, you'd bite the throat for justice." Zver frowned. And, old wise, chose the one who fights for the common good. Common? What common? I saw old Hassan a year later break a fiddler. Evidence? Zero. Everyone feared him. He decided who lives, who dies. Sari laughed dry, hoarse, coughed. Chish supported him. White cloth with a red stain. Remember the assembly 2 years ago when you were crowned? I vouched for you. Zver flinched. You lie, Zver hissed. Not, Ceres said, voice strengthened, deathly power. Kum offered transfer, medicine. He refused, sent him away. Cops don't set thieves, they help the rotten devour the honest. All assemblies, lies, theater, circus, to make them believe in an invented world, fear, give the last. Actually, hungry wolves and shepherds in uniform. Zver stood stunned. The world collapsed. Ceres smiled crooked. Lived by rules he helped invent. Life ruined for non-existent justice. Family, love, life abandoned. For the right to be a thief, to gain respect while they waited for him to die. Mission accomplished, temple blown from within. Zver stared seconds, then turned abruptly. Kaban, clean the filth, keep it quiet. Died of disease. Understood? Kaban nodded, blade in hand. And you? Chish nodded silently. Zver and Ryboy left. Door closed. 3 left. Dying old man, dumb executor with blade, young man whose faith just died. Kaban to the bunk, without malice, almost with sympathy. Job done, father. Sari didn't answer, stared at the ceiling, eyes empty. First blow under ribs, lung pierced, warmth in chest. Second blow to neck, blood from mouth. World faded, shrank, ears roaring like wind in camp pipes. Last thought, not assembly, not principles, not honor. Remembered mother's face, 5 years old. Rye bread with sugar, most precious. Traded for 27 years of hell, crown of barbed wire, death by hand of equally deceived fool. Morning news. At night, the old law thief Sarai died of consumption, quietly in sleep. Gangsters mourned, men silent respectfully. Zver, new ruler, collected a ruble from each for the family, though none existed. Money, communal fund. Evening, his followers gathered, drank chifir, smoked fine tobacco. So, Zver, now you're the boss, said Ryboy. Old man yielded. Zver silent, looked at hands with blue markings, fingers tattooed, thief. He didn't yield, quietly. Leave it, Kaban. Old man rave before death. Not raving, Zver, eyes evil, empty, no ambition fire, only cold ingrained fear. The old man spoke truth, his life, power, authority, fraud, grand lie he desperately wanted to believe. Stood up, went to small window. Snow swirled behind bars, camp alive. System works, Zver, main Klashupiet, new liar on throne of lies. Victory bitterer than defeat. Old law thief died, but his final confession, his poison, began to eat the soul of the new king from inside. Punishment worse than any blade.